The hall of the alien council was vast and cold. Torches burned along the stone walls, their flames barely touching the shadows above. Hundreds of eyes watched from balconies as the human warrior was dragged into the center. His clothes were torn, his skin marked with scars, but his head was unbowed. He had survived the battle when no one expected him to. He had faced enemies 10 times his size, and still he stood. The council leader, a towering alien with ridged skin and burning yellow eyes, rose from his throne. His voice echoed like thunder across the chamber. "You fought well, human. You did not run. You did not beg. For this you shall have a reward," the crowd murmured. A reward from the council was never a blessing. It was always a trap. At a signal, the heavy doors opened. 2 alien women were dragged forward in chains. They stumbled on the stone floor, their bodies bruised, their faces pale with exhaustion. Both were striking in their own way, tall, fierce, and proud, even in captivity. But their pride had been beaten down by the council's cruelty. Heavy iron collars circled their necks, connected by thick black chains that rattled with every step. The council leader raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "You may choose one," he declared. "One to be yours, a prize for your survival. The other will be returned to the pits." Gasps filled the hall. The pits were a place worse than death, a place of endless torment. Everyone stared at the human, waiting. The 2 women lifted their eyes toward him. There was no hope in them, only a quiet, bitter expectation. They had been through this before. Warriors, lords, and hunters had chosen between captives, treating them as trophies. They did not believe this human would be any different. The human stood silently, his eyes moving between them. One woman's skin was dark as night, her long hair wild around her face. Her eyes burned with defiance, even as chains held her down. The other had green skin and silver hair that glowed faintly under the torchlight. Her gaze was softer, filled with sorrow more than rage. Both knelt before him, bound by iron, forced to wait for a decision that would decide their fate. The council leader leaned forward. "Well, human, choose. Take one, and prove you are worthy. Or are you too weak to decide?" The crowd laughed, jeering, waiting for the spectacle. They wanted to see the human hesitate, to see him tremble under the weight of the choice. But he did not tremble. Slowly, the human stepped toward the women. His boots echoed on the stone floor, each step heavy with silence. He stopped in front of them, looking down at their chained forms. Their breaths were shallow, their bodies tense. Then he crouched, his voice low but strong. "You are both alive," he said. "And as long as I breathe, neither of you will return to chains." The women's eyes widened. They had not expected such words. The crowd erupted in confusion. Whispers spread like fire. What did he mean? The council leader slammed his fist against the throne. "You will choose one, human. That is the rule." The human rose to his full height, his eyes locked on the leader. His voice carried across the chamber, clear and unshaken. "Then I choose both." The hall fell silent. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the crackle of the torches and the sound of chains rattling. The alien warriors in the room froze, unable to believe what they had heard. No one had ever defied the council like this. No one had dared. The council leader snarled, his voice a growl of fury. "You dare defy us? You dare break our command?" The human did not step back. He did not bow. His words cut like steel. "I do not take what you call rewards. I free what you call slaves. Humanity does not kneel to your laws." The 2 women stared at him in disbelief. In their entire lives, no one, not even their own people, had spoken for them like this. They had been treated as spoils of war, as objects to be owned, and yet here stood a human, bloodied and scarred, declaring they belonged to no one, not why. Crowd erupted again, half in rage, half in shock. Guards tightened their grips on their weapons. The council leader rose from his throne, his voice shaking with fury. "Then you will die, human. You and those you try to claim." But the human only smiled, his eyes hard with defiance. "Better to die free than live as a slave." The torches flickered, and for the first time the council hall felt colder. The women's chains rattled again, but this time it was not the sound of despair. It was the sound of hope beginning to stir. The choice had been made. The human had not bent. He had not played their cruel game. He had defied them all. And in that moment, before the first blade was drawn, before the first strike of rebellion, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The chamber shook with anger. The human's words still echoed, louder than the flames that burned on the walls. I choose both. For a moment there was silence. Sharp, heavy silence. Then came the roar. The alien crowd exploded in fury. Voices shouted curses, claws, scratched against stone, and weapons were drawn with a metallic hiss. No one had ever spoken to the council this way. No one had ever dared. The council leader's eyes glowed like molten fire as he rose from his throne. His armor gleamed in the torchlight, his massive frame towering over the hall. He pointed a long, jagged spear toward the human. You have mocked us. You have spat on our law. Guards, cut him down. A dozen warriors stepped forward, their heavy boots striking the floor like drums of war. Their armor clinked with every step, their faces hidden behind masks carved with cruel expressions. In their hands were blades sharp enough to slice bone, chains ready to drag the women away. The two captive women trembled. Their chains rattled as they pressed close together, their eyes darting between the approaching guards and the human standing, tall before them. They had seen many warriors before, but none who faced the council's wrath and did not break. The human did not move. His hands hung loose at his sides, his breathing calm. His eyes stayed fixed on the council leader. When the first guard reached him, swinging a blade toward his head, the hall expected to see him fall. Instead, the human caught the strike with his bare arm. The blade cut his skin, blood spilling down, but he did not flinch. With his other hand, he grabbed the guard by the throat and slammed him into the stone floor so hard the chamber shook. The guard lay still, defeated with a single move. Gasps echoed through the hall. The human turned slowly toward the others, his voice like steel. You want me to choose? Then I choose to fight. The second guard lunged, but the human sidestepped, driving his fist into the alien's chest. Bones cracked. The alien fell to the ground, groaning in pain. The others hesitated. For the first time, the guards of the council felt fear. The women watched in awe, their wide eyes reflecting the firelight. They had expected him to die. Instead, he fought like a storm breaking chains. For the first time in their lives, someone was fighting for them. But more guards poured into the chamber, their weapons raised, their footsteps echoing like thunder. The council leader sneered. You cannot fight us all, human. You will be buried here, and your defiance will be forgotten. The human looked down at the women, then back at the council. His jaw tightened. Then remember this. Humanity does not kneel. Not to chains. Not to you. Not ever. He reached for the chains that bound the women. With a roar, he pulled. Muscles strained, veins bulged, and iron links snapped like brittle twigs. The women gasped as the collars broke loose, falling to the floor with a loud clang. For the first time, their necks were free. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted in rage, others in disbelief. The council leader's face twisted with fury. Kill them all! The hall became a storm. Guards rushed forward from every side. The human pulled the women behind him, shielding them with his own body. Blades slashed, spears struck, but he moved with relentless fury. His fists broke bone, his elbows crushed armor, his blood mixing with the fire-lit dust of the floor. The women, though weak from captivity, began to rise. One grabbed a fallen spear, her green skin glistening with sweat as she swung it at a guard. The other, her eyes burning with rage, kicked another down, her chains still clattering from her wrists. They had been treated as spoils, as slaves, but now they fought beside the human, their spirits reignited by his defiance. The council leader roared, his voice shaking the hall. You cannot win, human. Even if you kill us, the Empire will crush you. You are one man against 1,000 worlds. The human, his body battered and bleeding, stood tall in the center of the chaos. His voice carried over the noise, fierce and unbroken. "Then let the 1,000 worlds hear this. I will never choose chains." The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat. Even in their rage, even in their hatred, they felt the weight of his words. This was not just rebellion. This was something greater. The women stood at his sides now, no longer captives, but free. And though their bodies shook, their eyes burned with the same fire as his. The guard stepped back, uncertain. The council leader's fury turned to something else. Fear. For he realized in that moment that this human had planted a seed in the minds of all who watched, a seed of defiance that could not be killed with chains or blades. The battle was not over. The Empire would not forget. But the first strike had been made, and in the cold, echoing hall of the council, the galaxy witnessed a truth it would never erase. Humanity did not break. Humanity defied. The council hall was chaos. Guards groaned on the floor, chains lay shattered, and the crowd screamed in disbelief. Never in living memory had anyone defied the council so openly. Yet one human stood tall in the center, blood running down his arm, his chest heaving with breath, but his eyes burning with fire. At his side stood the two freed women. Their chains were broken, but their bodies were weak from years of captivity. Still, for the first time in years, their eyes were not filled with despair. They were filled with something dangerous to the Empire: hope. The council leader roared from his throne. "Seize them! Do not let them leave this hall alive!" Dozens of fresh guards rushed forward, their boots pounding against the stone. The human clenched his fists, ready to fight again, but he knew the truth. If they stayed here, they would be overwhelmed. He turned to the women, his voice steady. "We run. Stay close to me." The women nodded, their breaths sharp, their hands trembling as they picked up fallen weapons from the floor. One carried a spear too heavy for her weak frame, but she held it anyway. The other clutched a broken chain like a whip, her green eyes blazing. The human grabbed a fallen sword, its edge nicked, but still sharp. With one swing, he cut down the nearest guard, then charged toward the great doors of the chamber. The women followed, their bare feet slapping against the cold stone. The hall exploded into violence. Guards shouted, weapons clashed, and the council leader's voice echoed above them all. "Close the gates. Do not let them escape." The massive doors began to shut, their heavy iron creaking as alien soldiers pulled the chains. The human's heart pounded. He sprinted faster, blood flying from his wounds, his teeth clenched. "Faster!" he shouted. The women pushed their bodies beyond their limits, stumbling, gasping, but refusing to fall behind. As the doors narrowed, the human let out a roar, diving through the shrinking gap. He rolled onto the cold ground outside, pulling one woman with him, then dragging the other through at the last possible moment. The doors slammed shut behind them with a boom that shook the fortress walls. Outside, icy wind cut across the night. Snow whipped in every direction, and the fortress loomed behind them like a beast of stone and iron. But there was no time to breathe. Horns blared from the towers, and fire-lit ships began to rise from the docking platforms. "They are sending hunters," one woman whispered, her voice trembling. The humans scanned the frozen landscape, jagged cliffs, deep forests, and rivers, frozen solid. The sky was alive with alien war banners, ships lifting into the clouds. His choice was clear. "We head to the woods. Move." They ran, their breaths clouding in the freezing air. The women stumbled often, their bodies frail, but the human carried them when they fell, his strength pushing past exhaustion. Each step was a defiance of the Empire, each heartbeat proof that he would not abandon them. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Alien hunters in armor rode beasts with glowing red eyes, their snarls carrying across the snow. Above, ships roared through the storm clouds, searchlights sweeping across the land. The human guided them into the forest, branches snapping under their weight. Shadows swallowed them, and the howls of the hunters echoed closer. One woman stumbled against a tree, her legs giving out. "Leave me," she gasped. "You cannot carry us both." The human crouched, lifting her into his arms despite his wounds. His voice was low, unshaken. Humanity does not leave its own behind. Her eyes widened, tears freezing on her cheeks. No one had ever spoken such words for her. They pressed deeper into the woods, the sound of hunters all around them. Arrows thudded into trees, searchlights flashed, and snarling beasts closed in. The human set the woman down and turned, his sword flashing as the first hunter burst from the trees. With a single strike, the alien fell, his blood staining the snow. The women fought too, weak but determined. One swung her chain like a whip, knocking a guard from his beast. The other stabbed her spear into the ground, blocking an enemy's path. Together they fought like survivors, their will sharpened by freedom. But there were too many. For every hunter they struck down, 3 more appeared. The human's muscles burned, his wounds deepened. But still he fought, teeth gritted, eyes blazing. At last they reached a frozen river. The ice stretched wide, smooth as glass, reflecting the moonlight. The human looked back. Shadows moved in the trees, hundreds of hunters closing in. He turned to the women. "We cross. If the ice breaks, it breaks. But we run." They nodded, and together they sprinted across the frozen surface. Their footsteps cracked the ice, but they did not stop. Behind them, the hunters followed, their weight too heavy for the frozen water. The ice shattered with a deafening crack. Screams filled the air as the hunters plunged into the freezing depths. The human and the women made it to the far side, collapsing on the snow, their bodies trembling. For a moment there was silence. Only the sound of the river swallowing their pursuers. The human rose slowly, his sword still in hand, his eyes scanning the horizon. He knew this was not the end. The Empire would not stop. The Council would not forgive. But as he looked at the 2 women beside him, once captives, now free, he felt no regret. The galaxy had forced him to choose. He had chosen both, and now together they would choose freedom no matter the cost. The frozen river was silent now, the broken ice swallowing the screams of the hunters. The human stood on the far bank, his breath rising like smoke in the night air. Blood stained his torn clothes, but his grip on the sword did not loosen. The 2 freed women stood beside him, shivering, their chains still clutched as makeshift weapons. Their eyes were wide, not with fear this time, but with something they had not felt in years. Pride, but their moment of rest was brief. From the fortress, horns blared again. More lights filled the sky as warships rose above the cliffs. Columns of armored soldiers marched through the woods, their banners snapping in the wind. The Empire had not given up. They would burn the forest itself to hunt 3 fugitives. The women looked at the human, their faces pale. "They will not stop," one whispered. "The Council will send everything. They will crush us." The human's eyes narrowed. He raised his sword, pointing it toward the glow of the advancing army. His voice was calm, steady, and terrifying. "Then let them come." The women stared at him in disbelief. His body was battered, his wounds deep, and still he stood as if nothing could break him. To them, he was not just a man. He was something greater, a flame that would not die. The first wave of soldiers burst from the trees, armored bodies shining in the firelight. They raised spears and rifles, their voices chanting in alien tongues. They expected an easy kill, but the human charged. He met them head-on, his sword flashing under the moonlight. The first soldier fell, his body cut clean through. The second swung a heavy axe, but the human ducked low, driving his blade into the soldier's chest. Blood sprayed across the snow. The women watched, stunned. The human fought like a storm, every movement filled with fury and precision. He was one against many, yet he did not falter. The soldiers regrouped, surrounding him. One shouted, "Break him! Break the human!" The circle tightened, weapons striking from all sides. But he moved faster than they expected. He twisted, dodged, countered. His sword tore through armor, his fists crushed bone. His roar echoed through the trees, a sound so raw it made even the soldiers hesitate. The women felt the fire inside them, awaken. No longer willing to stand back, they joined him. One lashed her chain around a soldier's throat, pulling until he collapsed. The other drove her spear into an enemy's leg, toppling him. Their bodies were weak, but their spirits burned now with his fire. Together, the three of them carved through the soldiers. Snow turned red under their feet. The air was filled with the clang of steel, the screams of the dying, and the thunder of war drums echoing from the fortress. Still more came, dozens, then hundreds. The human's breaths grew heavy, his wounds bleeding freely. Yet his stance did not break. From the trees, the council leader himself emerged, his massive form covered in black armor, his eyes burning like coals. He carried a war axe the size of a man, its blade dripping with venom. His voice rumbled like thunder. "You cannot win, human. You are nothing but flesh and bone. I am the Empire. I am eternal." The human spat blood into the snow, his eyes locked on the towering figure. Then tonight, eternity ends. The two clashed with a force that shook the ground. The council leader's axe slammed against the human's sword, sparks flying. Each strike was heavy enough to break stone. The human staggered but did not fall. He struck back, his blade cutting into the alien's armor. The women stood behind him watching, in awe. Every swing, every defiant roar was a promise. He was not fighting only for himself. He was fighting for them, for their freedom, for a truth greater than the Empire's lies. The council leader roared, swinging his axe in a wide arc. The human blocked, but the force threw him to the ground. The alien raised his weapon high, ready to end it. But before the strike fell, one of the freed women leapt forward, wrapping her chain around the alien's arm. She pulled with all her strength, the metal biting into his flesh. The other thrust her spear into his side, making him roar in pain. The human seized the moment. With a final cry, he surged upward, driving his sword into the alien's chest. The blade pierced through armor, through bone, through heart. The council leader froze, his burning eyes dimming. With a final gasp, he collapsed into the snow, his axe falling uselessly beside him. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining soldiers, once fearless, now trembled. Their leader was dead. Before them stood a human drenched in blood, his sword raised, flanked by two women once called slaves. The human's voice carried across the field, cold and unyielding. "You called this a reward. You called them captives, but they are free, and humanity does not bow to your chains." The soldiers lowered their weapons. Some dropped them altogether. Fear spread through their ranks. None dared to advance. The women stood beside the human, their chests rising with pride. For the first time, they were not prisoners. They were warriors. The fire of humanity had burned through the Empire's lies. And it would not stop here. Snow still fell over the battlefield, covering the blood and broken weapons. The body of the council leader lay motionless in the crimson snow, his war axe half buried beside him. For the first time, silence ruled the fortress grounds. The human stood tall, his sword dripping with blood, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. His body was battered, his wounds deep, but his spirit burned brighter than the fires of the torches. Beside him stood the two freed women, no longer captives, no longer slaves. Their chains were gone, their eyes shining with a fire that could not be taken away again. The soldiers who had once marched with pride now lowered their weapons. Fear rippled through their ranks. They had seen the impossible. A lone human, bloodied and outnumbered, had killed their leader in front of them all. The human raised his voice, steady and unbroken, carrying across the frozen field. "You tried to make me choose between them. You called them prizes, but hear me now, no life is a prize. No soul is a trophy. Humanity does not choose chains. Humanity breaks them." The words struck deeper than any blade. The soldiers shifted, uneasily, their eyes darting between one another. Whispers began to spread, not of rebellion yet, but of doubt. And doubt was the first crack in any empire. The human turned toward the two women. He saw the strength in their faces, the pride in their stances. Once they had been bowed by shame and fear. Now they stood as warriors. He placed his hand on each of their shoulders. "You are free. The galaxy will remember you not as captives, but as fighters." One woman, her green skin glistening under the torchlight, whispered, "We thought no one would ever see us as more than chains." The human looked at her, his eyes fierce. "Then let the galaxy see you now." At that moment, the sky thundered. From the clouds above, ships appeared, massive human warships, their metal hulls glowing against the darkness. Engines roared, and the ground trembled as the fleet descended. Reinforcements had arrived, answering the call of their brother below. The alien soldiers fell back in terror. The sight of the human fleet filled them with dread. They had mocked humanity, called them weak and primitive. Now they saw the truth. Humanity was fire, and fire spread fast. The lead human warship opened its gates, beams of light cutting through. The storm. A voice thundered across the field, carried by speakers. "To the human below, your fight is not forgotten. Stand ready, we come for you." The women gasped, their eyes wide as they looked to the sky. The human warrior only smiled faintly, his grip on his sword tightening. He had not fought alone. Humanity had heard. Humanity had answered. The alien soldiers scattered, some fleeing, into the woods, others throwing down their weapons in surrender. The Empire's proud warriors, once unshaken, now broke apart like glass. The human warships landed, their steel ramps slamming into the snow. Out poured more soldiers, men and women in human armor, their faces hard, their eyes filled with fury. They surrounded the battlefield, their rifles raised, their banners flying. The human who had defied the council was lifted onto his feet by his brothers. The two alien women stood at his side, no longer captives but allies. The human commander saluted him, his voice strong. "You stood alone against them, now you stand with us. Humanity does not forget its own." The human warrior looked at the women, then back at his commander. "They forced me to choose. I chose both. And I would do it again." The commander nodded, his eyes burning with pride. "Then the galaxy will remember this day. The day one. Man defied an empire and lit a fire no council can extinguish." The freed women looked at the ships, at the army of humanity standing ready. For the first time, they felt not only free, but protected. They knew their story would spread far beyond this frozen land. It would reach stars, worlds, entire civilizations, and everywhere it spread, it would carry one truth: chains break when humanity arrives. The human warrior, weary but unbroken, raised his sword one last time toward the night sky. The fleet roared in response, engines shaking the heavens, and, across the galaxy, the legend began. They forced him to choose. He defied them all, and in doing so, he gave the galaxy a new name for humanity. Not prey, not servant, but fire.